Something I find fascinating is the fondness many people have for the jobs they worked in their youth. That strange nostalgia for simpler days when our time was easily traded to do mostly low-stress, relatively banal customer service work, in exchange for some pocket money quickly spent on lighthearted youthful frivolities. And that nostalgia is something you see reflected in fiction, whether it's Lester Burnham's midlife yearning for a simpler time of flipping hamburgers in American Beauty, or even Chef Slovak's humanity being brought out by a request for a simple cheeseburger. And this is a nostalgia I can greatly identify with because when I was in my 20s, my job was, to be frank, the best job a young person could ever dream of, because I was the assistant manager at a record store by the beach. As awesome as you can possibly imagine a job like that to me, it was even better. I got paid to unlock the doors, throw on an album, and when there wasn't anything more pressing to do, just chill out, listen to music, and occasionally eat pizza or boardwalk fries. And not only was this the perfect job, it happened at least in my opinion, the perfect time. This was right before the resurgence of vinyl and the onset of streaming and digital downloads. It was the last great heyday of physical media, when everyone was still buying CDs, DVDs, and physical copies of video games. And we were buying them too, because this record store sold new and used everything, which meant part of my job was to go through the collections people would bring in, buy from them, and maybe pick out the good stuff for myself. Oh, and if all of that wasn't enough, every single week record companies would send us boxes of promotional CDs for us to take.
Hey! Is this heaven? No.
Managing a record store. So I wanted to take a minute and give you all a glimpse into what that heaven was like by spinning a few yarns and telling some tall tales from the wonderful world that was the record store in the 2000s. So you go into a record store and there's music playing, but who decides what's playing? Well, I can't say for certain how other record stores worked, but at my store we all took turns. When you come in for your shift, you join the rotation and everyone keeps a tally of whose turn it is to pick an album. It can be anything you want, or at least within reason. We're a record store, so obviously we're all cool, but we're also a record store in a beach town with lots of families on vacation. So while the occasional curse word is okay, you can't play anything that's too off the meat rack. Now, aside from that one rule, you could pretty much play whatever you want, and people who work in record stores are generally more open-minded to other people's music tastes. There was one girl who played Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco over and over again until eventually I became a fan. But there was one unfortunate soul who landed the dream job of working in a record store, and when the time came to pick something to listen to, he managed to choose an album that, while technically didn't break any rules, it did lead to him getting fired. Look, we got goth chicks, metalheads, hip-hop heads, skater punks, emo chicks. We got punk, sludge metal, post-hardcore, conscious hip-hop, and techno being played. So what could someone pick up and play that would actually get them fired? Well, I didn't even know it was possible, but this dude found it. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the motion picture soundtrack deluxe edition. Yes, not one, but 2 discs of songs from a musical. 2 hours of Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter singing about meat pies and murder. Now, it also didn't help that this guy was incredibly awkward and had no idea why everyone else thought it was weird to play that in a record store, or why you could actually see customers having a physical reaction of revulsion as they left the store. But yeah, that's what gets you fired. Generally speaking, the music employees choose rarely causes an issue, but when it did, it was sometimes pretty funny. One time a girl played Baroness's Red album, which I had been playing lately. When her turn came up again, she played an album by another band I like. At this point, another girl who worked there snapped and yelled at her from across the store, "He's not gonna fuck you, Whitney, pick your own music." Another time, a girl tried playing a punk album that I immediately had to turn off because it was riddled with profanity. Again, it's a record store, so we aren't prudes, but it's a tourist town with lots of families coming in and out, so we have to at least try and be welcoming to them. She rolled her eyes and picked something else, but when it was my turn to pick an album, she flipped out and began yelling at me because I was a hypocrite. You see, I played Common's Finding Forever, a hip-hop album with an explicit lyrics warning on the front. When I pointed out that I had played the promo copy, which was edited and had no profanity, I saw as the gears spun in her head, trying to find a reason why she wasn't totally full of crap, before blurting out that he uses racial slurs, the kind that end with an A, and that somehow made me racist. When absolutely no one bought that story, she told me to go fuck myself and walked out. But overall, getting to listen to music all day, every day, was one of the better parts of the job. Even better was watching as customers had all sorts of reactions to what they were hearing. There was a kind of personal satisfaction when a customer would come up to the counter, ask what was playing, and then buy the CD. One time I threw on an album by the New England metal band Unearth. The song Zombie Autopilot came on, which has one of the most epic guitar solos you've ever heard. There was this middle-aged guy flipping through CDs, and as the solo builds, you could see him start to notice, bobbing his head more and more, until it built to a crescendo, and I swear I could see his face melt off. "God damn," he yelled and grabbed a copy of the album. I mentioned before that we got a lot of free CDs. Well, one important lesson I learned is that you should never judge something until you give it a listen. So a box of promos come in one day and I flip through them and find this, Bastardos by the band Blues Traveler. Now that is a name I haven't heard in a long time. I remembered their songs from the radio and even enjoyed the album 4 as a kid, but this can't be any good, can it? Holy shit. I threw the CD on and was not ready for what I heard. This wasn't a faded rock band that had a few radio hits desperately trying to keep their fledgling music career alive. It was just awesome. If you've never heard this album before, check it out because it is way better than it has any right to be. Okay, so I want to tell you about Kyler. Kyler was an absolute legend. Usually when we hired somebody, we would train them how to use the register, how to restock, and how to monitor the store to make sure people weren't stealing anything. Kyler didn't really learn how to do most of that. He just stood in the back like a really stoned statue. I don't think it was because he couldn't do any of those things, he just didn't. He was this chill guy that would make you laugh and he got paid to hang out there. You know how if you ask somebody what kind of music they listen to, they'll say, "I listen to everything," when 99 times out of 100 that isn't true. But with Kyler, it was. One day he'd play grindcore and the next he'd be listening to Chet Baker. Anyway, my favorite Kyler story came during the dreaded, the hideous Memorial Day record store disaster. Memorial Day was always a madhouse. You have to leave for work an hour before your shift so you could catch a bus to the boardwalk. There were mobs of people all over the store, and you know what the worst thing that could possibly happen would be? If our credit card system went down, which it did. Do you know what a store, at least in the early 2000s, did when they no longer have the ability to charge customers credit cards? Why, they take out one of these and have to physically write down every SKU, every price, and hand crank a paper receipt that captures the credit card number. It's tedious as hell, but it's all we got. And since I, as manager, have to jump in and do this myself with a mob of customers, the only thing preventing us from being robbed blind by shoplifters is Kyler, the hulking, perpetually stoned statue standing in the back and mean-mugging everyone. And that evening, it seemed like the store would be busy forever. We couldn't check people out as fast as they were coming in, so the crowds of people didn't dissipate. So as captain of this sinking ship, I had to make a decision. I called Kyler up to the front because it was his turn to pick out an album, and I told him, I want these fucking people out of here. And Kyler did not disappoint. Toxic Holocaust. Full throat, full volume, get the fuck out. And so we stood and watched as the crowds of tourists finally took the message and left. And when the store had mostly cleared out, Kyler and I watched in amazement as a black guy in his 70s stood within inches from one of the speakers and flipped through bargain DVDs without a care in the world for the black metal being blasted in his face. And that's it for today's Tales from the Record Shop. If you want to hear more, sub up, thumbs up, and let me know in the comments.